This is the Neo Show, where the minds shaping tomorrow speak today. Brought to you by Neo, the browser redefining what AI can do for you.
So this is a Neo Show. The reason we call it a Neo Show is, we started a AI native browser called a Neo. I don't know if you had a chance to use it, but we wanted to use this opportunity to bring all the AI companies, the founders, investors, maybe scientists, to the show to talk about AI. So that's why we call it a Neo Show. First and foremost, make an intro of yourself very quickly.
Sure. So Kyle Forster, I'm the founder of a new company, RunWhen. This is my, I don't know, I'm starting to lose count of how many startups I've done now just because I'm old. Before this, I was at Google. I was on the Kubernetes team. Before that, I was with Howie as the founder of Big Switch Networks, one of the earliest companies in software-defined networking. I've always bounced in between sort of fairly kind of, I've always been in infrastructure in some form, and myself sort of bounced in between the business side and the technical side in the last decade or so, mostly on the founder side.
So my background is like you, spent years and years in the infrastructure. But recently, I started working on Neo, the AI native browser. What's your take of Neo?
I mean, first of all, the magic bar is like the chef's kiss, right? I mean, I think ever since GitHub put in their command bar, was it 12 years ago, something like that? I've seen so many renditions of products trying to copy that experience. I've personally done 2 versions of our own user interface with it. It is so hard to actually get a magic bar interaction that works really, really, really well. And I mean, nice work. I use it in the last hour, probably 30 times or so. I mean, that is like a nice centerpiece. I like it much better than like the Arc version. I think you guys learned from all of the predecessors in the industry and nailed it. And the speed, man, the speed is really like a wow. I mean, that's a big deal.
I need to let my engineers know about it. Ever since we sort of pushed out the Magic Box in the as a concept, as a product, pretty much all the modern browsers copied it. So we are very, very happy to see that. Great. So we are having the first you are having the first experience with Neo. Hope to hear more from you over time. Let's actually proceed to our kind of AI conversation in general. So tell us a little bit about RunWhen, because you started this company before ChatGPT moment, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us, what about the company in the context that when ChatGPT came, what's the impact to you? Like, do you feel like, hey, this is actually I need to, have a rebirth of the company or something else? What went through your mind when the ChatGPT moment came?
So I think if I remember right, I think you saw the very first version of the investor deck for RunWhen. And I remember very well, we said, hey, we think if we do this, this, and this, then if we're successful, we think that by 2028, we'll have a large enough corpus of data where traditional machine learning models could be really, really successful in doing the logic that we care about, what will be now considered the agentic loop. And we're like, we just need to do these 4 years of engineering. We just need to have this number of customer runs on our side, this many tens of thousands, before we think that we'll have good signal to noise, because our agentic loop was complicated. And I remember so well, I think ChatGPT had been out for about 4 weeks or so. And I had a conversation with our largest angel investor, a brilliant guy, former CTO of Goldman. And he said, Kyle, what are you scared of? And I said, Don, we've been working on RunWhen for 2 years now. And I told you in 2028, I thought we'd have enough data to do ML, to do the algorithm that I really, really want to build. And I am so scared that somebody figures out a way to use LLMs to get there before we do. I remember very well. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I will double my angel investment right now. And I will make a handful of phone calls, because I bet a bunch of other people will, if you stop everything that you're doing take your product out of beta and rethink the whole thing from the ground up, and you be that company. And it was a super scary moment because the next day was the SVB collapse. And so the idea of like actually raising money in the middle of that chaos, I mean, talk about a week. That week, we raised $1.7 million from basically like experts in the field, like no funds. Everybody with the idea, you know, some of them were a little bit familiar with RunWhen, some of them didn't know it yet, but everybody's like, wow, you're going to try to use LLMs to take your 2028 roadmap and pull that way in. And we delivered the 2028 roadmap in fourth quarter of 2024.
Wow, congratulations. I think, you
I mean,
know,
a total like, whoosh, let's rebuild the whole thing all at once moment.
that's very good. So that's a very interesting topic, you know, for us to dive deeper. Axel, any other things you wanted to hear from Kyle or learn from him? Because, you know, Kyle is such an entrepreneur, you know, serial entrepreneur, there's so much for you to hear from him directly.
Exactly. As you just said, he's had a lot of experience. And as he mentioned, you founded many startups. And I'm curious right now, particularly in the AI era, do you see any challenges when you're trying to, I don't know, get more output, more productivity from your employees in a time where everyone's leveraging AI?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of experience only because I'm old. You know, that part's kind of inevitable. Yeah, not because I'm particularly good at it. I've just been around for a long time. Look, when we made this big turn as a company, and this is, you know, I think it's starting to go out of the popular memory, but in 2024 was a big deal. Not everybody on our team made the turn. We put in not only our own AI tooling, but also as we started kind of using LLMs more and more, and they were pretty crappy back then, right? We were trying to do like really, really early forms of planning before a lot of the best practices and model ability around planning was a thing. We tried to do tool calls before tool calls was a thing. And, you know, for a lot of our folks, the idea of dealing with non-deterministic planning, like smack in the middle of our most important algorithm, was just not something that they could get their heads around or wanted to get their heads around. So that was tough, right? Every time you change the mission of the company, you kind of change the culture a little bit. And some people doubled down and then some people didn't work out. And that's a bummer. I think as I look today, look, AI coding tools, it's kind of a no-brainer. Everybody's using them, right? I think to me, the interesting challenge that we've faced over the last 6 months now is AI coding tools make an individual massively productive. But I think we're seeing a lot, like they don't necessarily they make the team like 10 or 20% more productive, but that's kind of all that you get if the only thing you're investing in is an AI coding tool. So we've been focusing on a lot is like, how do we get the whole team, you know, for our top people, they're now like lines of code, like 4 to 10x what they used to be. How do we get the team operating at 4 to 10x what they used to be? And that's been for us like a 6-month journey with all kinds of like as much like process and, you know, boring stuff as like leadership and culture, which is maybe easier to talk about. And then tooling, which is like really, really easy to talk about. But that part has been like getting team productivity up beyond the 10, 20% gain. That's been a really, really big adventure.
May I ask what tools you guys are using?
Sure. So at this point, we're almost all converted over to Cursor specifically because of Cursor rules, like nothing else, which I think there's a whole interesting topic there. I think that's a big part of our tool chain. A couple of other parts of our tool chain are homegrown, which I think are very, very, very important as well. I think as much as like code structure, we were lucky that, you know, we're still writing a lot of code to our code base. It's a structuring our code so that we don't have that many cases where we have 2 people working at super speed on overlapping data structures who are like clobbering each other's work, given the speed at which they can go now. Like finding ways to organize our code and our team so that we get the max value out of each individual person's productivity is kind of new. And that took some restructuring and that took a few mistakes.
Typically, I would ask this question later, but I can't wait. I've looked at the LinkedIn data, right, for job offerings compared junior versus senior, and typically they see roughly the same growth every year. However, recently with AI, you know, maybe in the past 2 years, you see junior job offerings kind of go on a cliff a little bit, and seniors start to rise even more. And so what advice could you have for someone in the workplace, or maybe, soon to enter the workplace, perhaps? Uh, what should they be thinking about?
Beyond get better and better at chess, man, because I saw on your profile. I mean, that was very, 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 very impressive stuff.
Thank you.
I did this lecture at Stanford, and I still believe it. I think become the world's expert in something, and then let the world know that you're the expert in it, and then there will always be people knocking on your door because they want you. And that sounds so hard, and it's not. Just pick a small enough niche, and like it probably takes like 3 or 4 months of doing a lot of reading to become the world's expert, as long as you pick a niche that's small enough. And then maybe it takes 6 to 9 months of like a lot of publicizing and a little bit of luck before a fair number of people recognize you as that expert. I gave this whole talk at Stanford about it because I think that for me at multiple points in my career was like why I had nonlinear progression. And people think becoming the world's expert in something is like so hard, and it's not. And they think it takes like a decade. No, it doesn't. There are tons of areas where you can be the world's expert, like in between like now and Christmas. And I don't think you need to pick it that wisely, because if you get it wrong, it's not like it's that much time. Become the world's expert in something else. So I'm a big believer, like become the world's expert, publish your knowledge, like move the frontier of the world's corpus of knowledge forward a little bit. And of course, there are going to be people knocking on your door.
Now, may I ask for a quick example? Because now I might just have to start doing that after this.
I mean, let me give you a super out of date example, because the thing for me that was my first career break, I was working at this like basically programmers for hire, services firm. This was in '99 when mobile, like we didn't have these types of phones yet. Mobile was still like you get like 4 lines of text. And mobile interfaces for anything other than a phone were kind of unknown. And there were like 3 of us that got together Tuesday nights to do like mobile coding and like building little interfaces, first like over text and then over WAP and then over CHTML, all the stuff that's like gone from the industry completely. This was pre-iPhone, and that group of 3 became a group of 5. And then 4 months later, became a group of 100 people, because so many of our clients all of a sudden started asking for mobile interfaces for a lot of the websites that we were building. And I was like the company's leading expert on building mobile interfaces because I was the only one who had done it. And the CEO, I remember chatting with him, and the COO, and they were both like, Kyle, like you're like a million miles away from being qualified. You're not like actually managing like a 100-person engineering team. You're not that good at it. You're not that qualified for it. But the bigger problem is I wasn't all that good at it. But they said that like we've interviewed like 8 people and nobody else knows what they're talking about in this mobile interface area, and you're like the only one. So now we need to give you all this coaching. I started meeting with the COO once a week because he's like, you're abysmally bad at managing, and you're managing one of the largest teams in the company. We need to get you very good at this very fast. And it was only because I was the only one there that knew anything about this mobile interface business. So that was like 1999 mobile interfaces. So it'll seem kind of arcane and it'll seem kind of offbeat, but that's okay.
So one trick is to go earlier, right? I think that would pay off. Kyle, you always strike me as someone who is both, you can present to the CIO, CTO of Goldman Sachs, in the morning, 10 o'clock, and then dive very deep into, some coding stuff with engineers at 11 o'clock. How do you do that? And then do you recommend people to have this sort of a, being able to swim at different, lanes at the same time? Is that something that you would highly recommend, or how do you think about it?
First of all, let me say I'm very flattered, very, very, very flattered on many fronts. Second of all, can I please give my wife that last snippet, because, then I have to communicate with her, and, things, sometimes she thinks I'm great at it and sometimes not. I've always been drawn to being both both on call it the technical side and on the business side at the same time. And I remember back at Big Switch, I had 5 board members say, "Hey, Kyle, you're kind of like a fish out of water because it's like you don't really fit on the engineering team all that well, and you don't really fit on the sales and marketing team all that well. So like, dude, you have to pick one because otherwise, like, we don't really know what to do with you." And I kept trying to pick one and never really worked out. So finally, I just became like the founder guy, which is what I really enjoy because I kind of like doing both at the same time. I mean, I'm like the business side of our current startup. I've also contributed 500,000 lines of code to the product. I'm having like and I like being able to do both. And before AI, time was really a huge limit because the unit productivity per hour of actually writing code was low enough. It didn't really make that much economic sense for me to continue. So for 18 years, I was just doing side projects. But now it kind of does. Every exec I know, like because of AI coding tools, are like coding again, whether it's on the side or like a little bit more, at least. Sure, but it's not production stuff. Or sometimes, I mean, in my case, it was production stuff, but sometimes it's production. Sometimes it's just prototyping because it's now faster to write a prototype and have people try it and get feedback as a leader than trying to like write a presentation and trying to like get feedback about some conceptual idea. I mean, I really do think it's actually faster for me to write a UI now and a functional UI than it is for me to write slides. And that's a huge change from where we were 4 or 5 years ago. Like that's an enormous, enormous change. The speed at which you can get a concept in your head actually into something that works is thrilling. And I think it actually does change the nature of leadership in our industry because I do think that big concept will be like one skill, but like actually saying, and here's like actual product concept, organizationally that won't be divorced by 3 levels of management anymore.
Very interesting. So basically you're saying that, the Kyle Forster I know for years might be a unicorn, might be a, very rare beast in the past. But you actually highly recommend people sort of doing both technical and non-technical stuff moving forward because, we all have this tool called AI or ChatGPT or whatever tool you are using. You feel like this is the norm, the new norm, moving forward.
100%.
Very interesting. So I just had a conversation with a head of engineer of one of the largest hedge funds. You're talking about 1,000 engineers in the hedge fund that just that large. He told me one thing that really, really, struck me. He said, on my way from Florida to Las Vegas in one of the trips he had, he prototyped something, and after he's done, after he got off the airplane, he realized that if he would have had his engineers to do it, it would have taken, in the past, it would have taken months and then very expensive engineers. You're talking about a $3 million proof of concept. He, finished it just, on the flight. So, that's kind of a new norm. You are saying that, we're going to see more and more.
Like that. I think it applies with code, which we've talked about a bit. I also think it applies with, I'm seeing just coming off an interesting week on this one right now, where when you have kind of abstract, either engineering concepts that are part of some critical problem that you have to solve, or go-to-market concepts that you have to solve, some really critical sales pipeline problem, and you're trying to describe like, hey, in either MEDDIC terms or BANT terms, like, hey, how do we qualify to the next stage? In the exact same, I was having that conversation this week. In the exact same week, we have this big problem that we actually introduced this new code path, and it's just absolutely crushing our production performance. Like our cloud spend just went up by a factor 6 because one specific code path that we put in. In both cases, we need vocabulary to talk about these problems that we need to solve, and the ability for any one of our leaders, like it just happened to be me on this last one, to say, ask ChatGPT, say, hey, what's kind of the right like industry terminology if I were an expert for this? Okay, great. And beyond industry terminology, can you tell me a little bit more about how this applies in my context, given all of our conversation history? Give me a definition of this in 2 paragraphs or less that everybody on my team would resonate with. Okay, great. here's a link. Okay, great. Now I'll just put that in the team Slack channel. We're talking about novelty gates. Like this actually came up in the last 3 days. Like we need a novelty gate for one very specific part of our code. And the ability for us now to all get on the same page on what a novelty gate is, which is fairly like arcane programming concept, like almost instantly was beautiful, right? Humans write at about 30 words per minute. So writing is kind of slow. We can speak and listen. We can speak at about 150 words per minute. We can kind of listen well at about 80 or 90 words per minute. But humans can read at like upwards of 300 words per minute. So our ability to just like read more, I think is, and the ability for this stuff to kind of unpack a sentence that I gave, turn that into a page that a lot of people could read. I mean, the ability to share context with a team is amazing.
By the way, this is one of the design principle of a Neo browser, because we believe that when you read, when you browse, you need a Superman sitting next to you to help you to browse, help you to consume the world's information in a way that you don't have to think all the time. Hey, what question do I ask? Because humans are not very good at asking questions, but the browser will proactively help you. So I would love to have you feel it and then tell us more feedback on this. Let me ask you, we only have, less than 10 minutes, but I have to ask you some very tough questions, before we get you off the hook. You said, hey, Axel, you have a very impressive background, young talent, potentially, your demand for that generation is you are both technical and then also non-technical stuff. So that's kind of what we're talking about. But let me ask you, right, you are a very tiny startup. Every hire is very important. Your next hire, would it be a junior talent or will it be a senior talent? Why?
I mean, less specific, we just hired 3 very junior people. So the next one I think is going to be senior. But
Why do you still hire junior talents? Because a lot of people are saying that, hey, what junior talents are doing, that's what ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever is already giving me. So I need the senior people to do the architecture stuff, right? When it comes to engineering, as an example, or people who are really experienced in some domain, so that they can tell the answer is right or wrong. I don't need a junior analyst, the junior engineer to give me the initial set of the answer. I wanted to hear what your thoughts.
I mean, I think like love him or hate him, I think that there's like a lot to be learned from Elon Musk's management style on some of the things that he espouses when you're building really, really complicated things that are probably more complicated than any one person can keep in their head. And they're incredibly interdependent between a lot of different people. Hey, if let's celebrate, we just get the engine to put out 30% more thrust at the cost of only 2 kilograms. Well, those 2 kilograms make the wings a little bit bigger, and now suddenly the engine has to put out 40% thrust, and now we kind of loop back and forth between engineering teams for months. I think there are a handful of and that describes our system very, very, very precisely. I think to me, I care a little bit less about certainly junior versus senior care has some correlation with age in our organization, but not a ton. No, let me say it more strongly. Actually, right now, snapshot, I think we're actually anti-correlated, which is pretty interesting, right? I think across like our senior and junior folks, there's, yeah, I would say that the correlation is like less than 0.6, which is pretty weird. I care very deeply about problem solving, and we do all of our interviews less about coding and more about problem solving. And I think everybody in the organization, every single person knows that, hey, you should be ready, willing, and able to go from how come in production, we just, where is the coding? Is there a first principles method by which we can find the coding path that just sent our performance in production up by so much? And take the exact same person and say, hey, can you actually look at our web to, it's called sales and marketing conversion funnel, and try to figure out, is there an optimization there? And use some of the exact same problem solving techniques back and forth. And who cares about the domain? I couldn't care less. And when you start to organize that way.
Junior versus senior people when it comes to problem solving, how do you see it?
I think the senior people have a big edge when it's in a specific domain and they've seen a bunch of these problems before. So call it they can lean on a lot of Sherlock skills, and they can probably predict the problems that are going to happen a little bit better, just because they've seen problems like these. So their ability to predict further in the future. But when a problem does happen, the ability to problem solve it, it's much less correlated with junior and senior now, but it is very correlated. Some people are just really much better at solving problems, I would say, than others. And some people are very good at like stepping out of their day job of, hey, here's the day job that I'm working on, but like the problem that I have to solve is company wide, and that my toolbox is not only my particular domain. Some senior people are particularly bad at that. So we've had a lot of people that say like, hey, here's the part of the system that I own, and all of the solutions that I can see to this problem have to be this part of the solution I own. And some of the quote junior, let's not use just younger people that we have, they're like, hey, I work on this part, but the solution to this particular problem sits somewhere completely different. So I'm just going to make a few commits over there. And that like floating around, bouncing around thing works for us really, really like extraordinarily well.
We have 3 minutes left. I want to leave the last question to my co-host Axel, because I actually truly believe that, yeah, to your point, right? Ultimately it's a problem solving, but the junior talents, they actually have less constraints in thinking about the world. They at this juncture of the AI era, I would even argue that the junior talents have a better chance to help us to change the world. Anyway, Axel, a lot of pressure for your last two questions.
Yeah, I mean, all I can think about now is finding a niche and becoming an expert, but I'll try. I'm thinking maybe we just real quick throw in a question from the audience. Someone was wondering, where do you see RunWhen maybe in the next coming years, and particular, how does AI play into that vision?
I mean, I'm a big believer that enterprise engineering is a lot bigger than coding. I think that there's an entire loop of making enterprise applications. Especially the stuff that I love is like applications that have to be up, like mission critical, like financial services, or like hospital systems, like airline systems, things that like they have to stay running, period, full stop. And I think there's a lot more there than just coding. I think that there's a whole set of disciplines around it that makes the pieces of software that kind of underpin our like life experience pretty well. And so I think for me, I wanted to start with SRE because it seemed like the least thought through part, not only in AI, but I saw stuff at Google SRE that I'd never seen anywhere else. So that seemed like the least thought through set of both practices as well as just low hanging fruit. And then I will always kind of imagine RunWhen starting there and expanding out.
So, SRE is really about making infrastructure more resilient and more stable, and then recover from any faults, right? That's sort of how I think about SRE. We all know that there's this, huge incidents that CrowdStrike caused, right? There are lots of reasons for, that to happen. But, if they had a RunWhen or RunWhen philosophy in their product, do you think that huge incident could have been avoided?
Yeah. So here's the most interesting thing to me about that, and it's actually been a huge influence for us. Let's take CrowdStrike. United Airlines, the total economic impact of CrowdStrike was about the same as a pretty bad snowstorm. That was it. Delta Airlines lost over $80 million, down for 5 days. Over the course of 4 years, it was their single largest impactful event. So you have one that's like, oh yeah, it's like a bad snowstorm, and the other like, this is the worst incident that we've had in 4 years. It is going to take us an ungodly amount of time to make all the money back, and we're going to start by just suing everybody. Same industry, same product, two different ways of operating their engineering cultures, two different ways of operating. And that to me is kind of, if you want to like quantify the value of SRE in the long tail, there's no better A/B test than that one.
Wow, that's a very strong statement. So, whether RunWhen or RunWhen like a product would have, made Delta you know, go through that storm, you know, much better, right?
Just be back up and running, because terrible things are going to happen in these complex systems. Terrible, terrible, terrible things. And can you prevent as many of them as you can up front, which is a huge source, I think, of untapped research in AI. And I think we'll see a lot of that. And then when they do happen, can you be back up and running quickly?
Okay, Kyle, this is a wonderful, you know, 30 minutes already passed. You know, I'm pretty sure, you know, Axel is going to think about, you know, what's the narrow field that he wanted to focus on. Maybe we should do episode 2 when he gets updated, you know, you get an update from him and then give him further advice and the feedback.
I'm the one who's looking for advice, man. Let's have it go the other way.
Okay, that's another topic we should discuss one time.
Hey, thanks,
Okay,
bud.
have a nice
Yeah.
one.
All right.
Bye-bye.
It's great.
Have a good one.
Great to meet you.